Constantine is the pen name of best-selling authors Lynne and Valerie Constantine. Their debut novel, The Last Mrs. Parrish, was a Reese Witherspoon Book Club selection and is in development for television. Their second book, The Last Time I Saw You, published by HarperCollins, is being adapted for the big screen. Their hotly anticipated third novel, WIFE STALKER, will be published on May 18, 2020. Lynne is a former marketing executive with a master's degree in business from Johns Hopkins University. She has explored coral reefs all over the world, sunken wrecks in the South Pacific, and fallen in love with angelfish in the Caribbean. Lynne also writes the Network series under the pen name L.C. Shaw. Valerie served as a White House assistant in the president's scheduling and advance office, planning presidential trips and travel, and has visited over 40 foreign countries. She has a degree in English literature. When she's not writing, you won't find her, as she and her husband will be traveling to some faraway destination. Together, Lynne and Valerie are national and international best-selling authors with books available in over 31 countries.
I'm Liv Constantine, and you're watching The Crew Reviews.
I'm Valerie Constantine, and you're watching The Crew Reviews.
Well, Lynne and Valerie, we want to thank you for coming on. We're excited to talk to you today. So I'm going to dive into the questions.
That's right.
So you're only the second writing team we've had on the show, but you're the first writing team we've had that actually writes under the same pseudonym. And you also happen to be siblings. So there's those that say, don't go into business with family members. It's a bad idea. I think you guys have probably shattered that idea with the success you've had. So can you tell us about how your writing partnership started and how you balance out your writing duties?
Sure. You want to take that now? Yes.
Oh, we started writing together quite a long time ago, 20 some years ago, I think, almost. And we wrote the first book that we wrote was Circle Dance. And we wrote at a time when we didn't know what we didn't know, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The book that a lot of people say, oh, I should have put that one in the drawer, but we didn't, and it got published, and it is still for sale. Still
you say that with a lot of hesitation.
I know, a lot of confidence in that one. Anyway, and then and so of course, what Lynne always does is buy a book on she buys how-to books. And so the book that she got was how to write your first novel, right? And right. Sell it and then make it an international bestseller, which that part of the book, I don't think you read that part then. Right. Stop before you got there. So that was our first foray into writing. And we got along really well. We had fun. And then we stopped and we went on with our lives and we did our separate things, and we got back together after a Thriller Fest conference, actually. Lynne went to Thriller Fest, and Lynne, you can take it from there and talk about your experience there.
Well, I moved away. We both used to be, Valerie is still in Maryland, and I lived in Maryland as well. And I moved to Connecticut when my kids were 4, so that was 15 years ago. And so at that point, that's when Circle Dance was out. We were doing a little bit of marketing on that. And then Valerie got involved in her work. I got involved in homeschooling my kids, which sort of took all my creative energy at the time.
I know that feeling.
Right. So I saw an ad in Writer's Digest for Thriller Fest. And so I decided to sign up because it wasn't far. We're, about an hour from where we were in Connecticut. And I went there thinking, well, I'm a writer. And of course I hadn't written anything in 5 years, and I had written 1 book. And I started meeting all of these other writers that had written 10 books, 15 books, and they were younger than I was. So I really began to feel like a slouch at that point. And I thought, all right, stop talking about being a writer and start writing again. So I had my laptop and I sat in every class. I mean, I think I took just such extensive notes. I didn't even take a lunch break because I didn't want to miss anything. I was just completely enthralled with the whole conference, and met, as you all know from being there, so many wonderful people in all different stages of writing, and many of whom have since become good friends. And so really motivated me to get back into writing. And I began writing Thriller, which at the time, it's gone through a lot of titles. I think I called it, I guess it was The Veritas Deception. It was a lot of things, which just ended up being published last year, and it's called The Network. So that was the one that I did
right.
by myself. So I was trying to get that published, and Valerie was at a point in her life where she was ready to start writing again. And she said, well, would you think about collaborating? And so when I put the thriller aside, when I finished that, we wrote a book that we did put in the drawer called Black-Eyed Susans, which was more women's fiction. And then we wrote The Last Mrs. Parrish. And that was the book, I think maybe, and I dragged her to Thriller Fest. First of all, I said, you have to come to Thriller Fest. And then right. And she was like, I'm not a thriller writer. And I said, doesn't matter. Little did she know that she was going to be a thriller writer.
Heck yeah.
And she came, right? And she loved it. And then when we wrote The Last Mrs. Parrish, we really didn't even know it was a thriller until we got an agent and she said, oh, this is a psychological thriller. So we said, oh, cool.
Okay,
And,
that's good.
right.
Delightful.
That's
Back right
so
into
awesome.
it.
So speaking of the books you've written, so your latest one that's coming out, The Wife Stalker, comes out on May 19th, right?
Right.
It follows your last two smash hits, The Last Time I Saw You, and of course, what you guys were just speaking about, your debut, The Last Mrs. Parrish. Can you tell us what we can expect, us, the crew, and our audience, what we can expect in this latest novel you have coming out, The Wife Stalker?
You can expect the most earth-shattering twist.
Go on, I'm listening.
Yeah.
Go on.
Momentum.
We're really happy with the twist in this book.
Yes.
And we had a great time writing it. It was really, really fun. And so far, the advanced readers have sort of agreed and thought that the twists were really took them for a ride.
Right. So this one has what? I'm sorry. This one also has got two female protagonists, but it's a totally different dynamic than The Last Mrs. Parrish. The Last Time I Saw You, which was our second book, really it was a psychological thriller, but it had more of the mystery vibe, and it was more a little bit of a cross between. It was compared like a Mary Higgins Clark or Agatha Christie combined with the psychological thriller. But with the Wife Stalker, we're really very much back in the same territory that we were in with The Last Mrs. Parrish. So we're in Westport, Connecticut. Not the same emphasis on wealth that Parrish was, but certainly a wealthy family, and a new woman coming into town with a mysterious past, and from the get-go that she's running from something, but you don't really know what. And then back and forth between the two women and a man at the center, but nothing, of course, is as it seems. So hopefully we'll give readers a good time with that.
I think they will.
Nice.
You're gonna have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah.
Well, you are so well known for your twists and your turns and your spicy characters. Do you, for your inspiration, do you start with a twist because that comes to mind, or do you start more with a character and then the twists come later? How's that writing process go?
I think we start with the twist, don't you think, Val?
Yeah, we definitely start with a twist. We talk a lot about setting up a scenario, and I think we pretty much know what the main twist is going to be, and then as we talk about it, and we talk about this probably 3 to 4 months before we really even begin writing. So we talk about it and all of the what ifs, and that's one of the great parts about collaborating, because you have somebody to bounce things off of, and I'll say something and then Lynn will say, well, but then what if this? And then I can come back with, well, that's great. And then what if we do this? And so it really feeds those creative juices, I think, to be able to talk to someone else about it. And as I said, we've pretty much know the primary twist, but then as we write and develop the characters, then other twists come in, other things start to happen. Wouldn't you say, Lynn?
Right, definitely. And there are times, I don't think we've changed, well, in The Last Time I Saw You, we changed a major twist, but for the most part, we do know the main thrust, but the twists definitely change and develop. And as we talk about it, and as we get to know the characters when we're writing them, all of a sudden, one of us will say, hey, well, what if we did it this way? And how about if it changes like that? And then it usually usually, again, it stays on the same trajectory, but it can be a significant twist. And we do rely very heavily on trying to write character-driven books. So what does happen is, as we're developing the characters, if a certain plot device or twist that we had planned doesn't really make sense any longer, because we just say, you know what, that character just would not do that, then we change it. We always go in favor of what the character would do. And so that sometimes drives a change in that. And there are times too, like actually the one that we're working on now, we're not exactly sure how it's going to end. We have an idea, but we'll always say, well, is that person going to live? Well, I don't know. We'll have to see. So, and then we apologize to the characters as we make their fates work. You just never know till the end.
Sorry.
We're like, sorry, I guess.
That's one of the coolest things about writing and not necessarily plotting. I mean, outlining your complete story is that as the writer, I mean, you get to discover it. What's going to happen as the story is unfolding. Within your own mind. I think that's the fun part of writing.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So there was an article that came out in the Big Thrill last summer, May or June, and which is part of the International Thriller Writers Organization, which Lori and I are part of now. Thank you. So the title was Overnight Success, 13 years in the making. So
brilliant.
we read about the journey, breaking into the industry and stuff. And so the question that I have is, what stands out as a tipping point when you felt like the momentum shifted in your favor?
Well, I think for me, it was a long time, as you know from the article, a lot of querying, a lot of rejection. And I think when we sort of made the decision that we were going to continue to keep writing that next book and not get stuck like on books that were rejected, and continuing to develop our craft, and just, for me, knowing that no matter what, eventually it was going to happen one way or the other. I didn't know when. And then really getting the help we need, like working with a professional editor, wouldn't you say, Valerie? Like when we, just knowing that, as Val said earlier, you don't really know what you don't know, and you can think that you've taken your book to a certain point. And I think now that we're with HarperCollins and we have an amazing editor, and we see, even when we get a book into her, how much better she makes it after 2 or 3 rounds. And I think that that's the part that was missing probably earlier when we kept writing and submitting. I think that you can really benefit, I think, from that.
You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly, to that next step. And you're so close to it that another person that can come in and say, hey, this is all really great, but here's a major flaw, that can be the one thing that keeps you, I think, from getting that agent and getting that book deal eventually. So I think, doing that work.
For me, I think I would put the time frame the same. When we got to Mrs. Parrish, when we decided to put that other book away, and that's a hard thing to do, I think, when you've really put your heart and soul into something and worked on it, and we did work with a freelance editor for that book as well. And then finally saying, okay, I'm putting this away, and we'll go forward and we'll start with something new. And I think that we both felt an excitement writing Mrs. Parrish that we hadn't felt up to that point, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
There was just something different as we were writing it. And then as Lynne said, we had another freelance editor we were working with, and there was something different about that as well. So not all editors are not all created equal. And it sort of was like the perfect storm. We felt like we had a good story. We were excited about it. We had a terrific editor, and it felt good. It felt like it was going to all come together, and it did.
Well, that energy that you feel comes through in the words, right? So.
Yeah, I like your fortitude with that. I think that speaks to a lot of people who are writing to not let the rejection stop you. I just had a question from somebody, a stranger on social media, say, do you have any advice for somebody who's just finished their manuscript and has a massive fear of rejection? I'm like, oh boy. That's
Yeah.
Another career.
Fight through that, man.
Yeah.
I think that is something authors have to do, and I think your story is very inspiring because of that. And I feel like it's an art that you just have to keep pushing through. And I love that you even said that you believed in what you were doing, and you're like, yeah, these are going to hit one day. I mean, I love that. Love that.
We're all experts in rejection. Experts.
Yeah.
You know what? And it's not just having a manuscript rejected, because if you start reading reviews, once you are published, you can read some really awful.
Oh, that's no doubt.
Want to pull the covers up over your head and
Thick
not
skin.
look up, right?
Yeah.
So,
And Valerie won't read any reviews, so I read them. And I can only send her nice reviews. Or then she'll say, well, how did the review? I'm like, well, do you really want to know? What should I do?
We didn't get any.
You read a bad review and it's sort of like, well, I already wrote it. What can I do? I can't go back.
Right? Yeah, I can't go back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, there's some validity in ignorance being bliss. I mean, so.
Yeah.
True.
Well,
That is
bad
true.
reviews are often not very helpful. You have a lot of people in your life that give you good critique that's helpful. Usually the bad reviews are things like, I write historical fiction, and one of my favorite bad reviews was like, well, I don't like historical fiction. I'm like, well,
why are you reading it? Yeah.
and so I don't think they're helpful anyway. So I think that's smart.
Yeah.
It's like those Google reviews that said, I didn't actually read the book, but. And it's like,
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm an expert.
You're an expert. So, hey, keeping up with that momentum shift that happened, Reese Witherspoon selected The Last Mrs. Parrish for her Hello Sunshine book club. And the novel garnered really broad praise from the publishing industry.
Mm-hmm.
Did the success from that novel, did that validate the decision to co-write together? And then as a follow-up to that, did it add pressure to up the ante when you wrote your next book, just from the pressure that you're feeling after all the reviews and all the praise you received?
Big time.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know that we ever doubted I think the co-writing we felt was the right way to go. And we love doing that, but absolutely the sophomore book has enough pressure on it as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, we were obviously thrilled that Mrs. Parrish did as well as it did, but trying to come up, because it's really difficult because you can't write the same book. Obviously, then people say, well, just write the same old thing all the time, but then not wanting to disappoint readers. So it was a really challenging book to write, which is why we were so happy to be on the third book, because now we're just like, okay, no, that's in the rear view, and hopefully, like I said, with the WIFE STALKER, which had the same energy and the same feel that we had with Mrs. Parrish. So although we love the second book, it's just a quieter book. So I think that there were a portion of our fans who while they liked it, it wasn't quite what they wanted. But then I do also think we got new fans more in the mystery genre who liked that more. So I think that was fine. And I mean, it's in development. We can't announce any more details, but it is in development for film. So we're hoping, that when that happens, I think it will really translate well into film. That's awesome. The paperback is coming out also in May for that. So yeah, and you feel bad because it's almost like your kids, you don't want to pick favorites, right? But there are different things you like, I think, about each book, right?
One of them's more successful than the other, though.
Well, that's right. But yes, we don't want to give an inferiority complex to any of them.
Do you think it was just too much pressure because your debut was so successful?
There definitely was. It was completely different writing that second book.
Yeah.
From the first one and the third one. I mean, we went into the third book really with the same sort of excitement and energy that we did with Mrs. Parrish. And the second book also took us longer. It took longer to write than the first.
Interesting.
Or the second, or the third, I mean. So the pressure definitely impacted the whole experience of writing that second book.
Yeah.
And I've heard it from a lot of people, and our agent kept telling us that too, that the second book is really it's a tough book. When you're writing the first book, you're really writing it not for yourself, but you don't have any constraint. You don't have any deadlines looming.
Right.
Yeah.
You have your whole life to write that first one.
He's just writing sort of. Yeah. And then, and in fact, with the fourth book, what we learned from that too is that we need to keep that excitement. So we wrote a fourth book and sent it to the freelance editor, and she gave back some comments, and we knew that we were going to have to do a significant rewrite, and we just said, let's put it aside, and we totally started over on a new book that we had discussed. We were at the Sharjah Book Festival, and we were talking about what we're writing now being the fifth book, and I said to Val, should we just put this one down and start? And she said, yeah, because we were really psyched about this one. So now we're in the midst of that. We just hit 80,000 words today on our first draft on that one. So yeah, so we kind of learned that, even if,
that's
had a lot of courage to do that.
Right. It does. I mean, hopefully, and I like the premise of the other one, and hopefully we'll come back to that. But if not, it's always helpful. I mean, it just improves your craft the more you write. And that's what we're just trying to do, is put out whatever the best book is that we can put out, and hope that.
Right.
Well, I read that you guys attribute your ability to concoct dark storylines to growing up listening to tales handed down by your great grandmother. Now, my own Italian grandmother, all I ever got from her were really good recipes. No scary tales. But so I'm curious, what was the creepiest tale you remember Grandma telling you?
Creepiest tale.
Oh, I'm going to make Val answer that since she's a little older.
Here we go.
Recipes are really important. My son just called before this and wanted to know something about Greek bread and an ingredient. But the creepiest one, well, her father was a ship captain, and he went back and forth between Greece and Egypt. And as she reached her late teens, she was traveling with him often, and even went to school for a little while in Egypt. And she told us a story of while she was there. She was in Alexandria, living in Alexandria and going to school, and she wasn't living alone because that's not something that you do then as a young Greek girl or Egyptian or whatever. But she was living with a family, and she was coming back from school one evening, and it was starting to get dark, and she was being followed by somebody. And she would turn around and then not see anyone, but she knew, she could hear this person following her, and just knew the feeling.
Of course.
There was somebody behind her, and this kept happening every day, and she never saw this person, and they never made themselves present to her. So but later, and she told her father about this later, and he told her that there were other young women who had told this same sort of story of this person who was following, and then it all became mixed up with this man who had died, almost as if this was sort of a spirit kind of was following.
Really?
And I won't go into all of the details, but would you say that was the creepiest thing she ever told us?
Pretty creepy, yeah.
Yeah. Got me.
Being followed by a spirit. There you go.
Yes.
Oh.
There's literally no slick segue from that into my next question.
Come on, do it.
Do it.
You can do it, Lori. We believe in you.
Well, you know, when we're as a career as an author, there's so much more to everything than just writing. There's creepy stories, there's Greek bread, there's a lot. Do you ever, I know Lynne, I'd read, had some marketing background, but there's so much of social media and book tours and marketing yourself that doesn't go with just the publisher. You know, you're responsible for that. Do you ever feel like it's too much? And how do you balance that with the writing and making that still the key component to what you do?
I mean, yeah, I do. Would you say?
You do all of the social.
I'm writing. I come upstairs into my office, and I'm usually here at 6 or 7 in the morning, and I pretty much work all day. And I can't be writing that whole time because it's just obviously too draining. So I use social media a lot of times as it kind of is a nice break for me, even though it's work. I mean, whether it's making graphics or going on, you know, hopping on Instagram, chatting with people, which I love talking to people on Instagram. I mean, that's like a fun place with a lot of connection, I think, with book bloggers and with readers. So at this point, it's for the most part, it's a break for me, and it's nice. I mean, the part that I feel like I'm falling down a bit, which I think I'm going to hand over to Valerie, I think she would be better at it, is like a newsletter and keeping in touch. We have a mailing list, but that is something I find a little more arduous. But the social media part is fun, and the marketing. And then the book touring, again, is great, meeting everybody, but it's just the getting from place to, you know, the being tired, just the traveling, hopping on planes, and as you know, and so somehow it seems to end up that we're always editing when we're on tour. Don't you think, Val? I don't know. Not always, but occasionally, which that gets a little tiring, you know. So it just depends on how things shake up. I mean, if they come sequentially, it's not so bad, but occasionally when it's a perfect storm of trying to market things or, you know, having an appearance and working on something else, it can get a little bit much. But I think it's a nice mixture. I don't think I could just sit and do nothing but write all day long.
I have to say that, you know, when I think about how the writer Ann Tyler, who is from Baltimore and was pretty much considered a recluse in terms of not giving interviews and not really wanting to do book signings and that kind of thing, I kind of related to that. I understand how she felt. And then I think it was about 2 years ago, I read an article about her, and it said that she finally realized that in today's world of social media that she had to sort of come out of the closet and do interviews and make appearances, and she is doing that now, and I'm sure it's really tough for her. And I do think that a lot of writers are introverts.
Sure.
I happen to be one. And so for me, it's that part of it is difficult. I enjoy it. I love meeting readers. I think that's really fun, and I like going to our events. But I feel like it takes a lot out of me.
That's why at Thriller Fest you see me in the bar all night, and Valerie's.
And I'm back in the room. She's you know, networking and shaking hands and talking to people, and I'm gone. So that part's tough for me.
Sure.
I didn't know about the newsletter, though. I'm glad you told me that.
Yeah, added her to the list of to-dos today.
Yeah, I'll be FaceTiming you tomorrow about that.
Hey, Lynne. Lynne, let me ask you, what do you find? I heard you mention Instagram. Do you think that's the most or the easiest way for you to reach your readers, or do you use any other platform?
I do. I used to be really very heavy on Twitter, and I'm still on Twitter, and I like it. But I find for me, and other people, I do see a lot more engagement. For me, I find more engagement on Instagram. So whether that's people that are tagging, I mean, I'll post a lot of things too. I'll post other authors' books. I'll post pictures of the dogs, you know, different things that I may be interested in, and then I'll repost other people's things. But we do get a lot of people tagging us, you know, with pictures of the book, and, you know, in all different settings, or people messaging, asking questions or talking about the book. So I do try to respond to everybody that writes to me. So, and at this point it's still manageable. So I don't know if that will, you know, again, if that will change. But yeah, I probably spend a couple hours a day on Instagram if I would add it all up.
Yeah, that's a commitment. It
Yeah.
truly is.
Yeah. So we've asked a number of authors on our program the differences that they've had dealing with Hollywood versus publishing world. And I think we've all come to realize that they are truly the opposite ends of the world. So you have television adaptations coming, film, Last Mrs. Parrish, The Last Time I Saw You. What's been your experience in dealing with Hollywood versus the publishing world?
Hollywood is a
big
lot
time
slower.
Right.
Slower. I mean, I think, the people are lovely, and generally, you get on a phone call and couldn't be nicer. But I just think, I don't know if they just have so much going on that to them, 6 weeks between an update seems normal. But that's been our experience. So we've had to really sort of modify our expectations and just kind of be grateful for whatever happens and keep our fingers crossed, but not, necessarily count on it, because it just seems like, there are a lot of things that get optioned, and but it's definitely slow. I mean, and one of the authors said to me a while ago that publishing is slow, but Hollywood is glacial. I think that
I was going to say, man, publishing world is extremely slow.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and when you're used to being
Lightning speed compared to Hollywood.
which I am, right? Val knows that there, because I'm like,
Right.
constantly, whatever. I will get an email. Now, although you've been beating me lately, I used to say, hey, have you seen that email? She would say to me, I don't have to answer everything in 5 minutes, but now I'm getting texts from her. Hey, did you see that email? So
She's got her own deals you don't know about yet.
she may have, that's quite possible.
So, as in most professions, communication it's key, especially in the publishing world. So which of you usually, and I think you might have hinted at it, takes point when dealing with your editor or your agent?
It's probably 60-40, wouldn't you say?
I would say. I mean, and oftentimes
Lynne.
we'll discuss it, right? And then, I mean, Val has kids all over the country, and
like 20 or something, or
This is a story, people. Story. What's going on?
kids all over the place. But
Let's dig into this one.
In and out of the country. Right.
Yeah, right. She travels a lot. She travels more than I do, because my kids just started college. So up until this year, for the most part of, especially when they were in high school, we really were much more grounded. And so we would discuss things, and then I would just, in the interest of not having to pull everybody together or try to get her off some beach somewhere, we would talk about it.
She's making it sound a lot more romantic than it.
So the four of us, we talked a little bit earlier about Thriller Fest. So the four of us, plus our missing and co-host, Sean, we all met at Thriller Fest last year, actually. And that's kind of where the idea for this podcast even came.
First time?
Yeah.
First time we met, yeah.
Well, we had talked to each other for about a year, maybe. Or
yeah, it was a while.
Less, maybe less than that. But yeah, we all met together.
In different places?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where is everyone?
Well, I'm in Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay.
And I'm in Denver.
I'm in the Carolinas.
And I'm in New York City, and Sean's in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So for us, like we were talking about earlier with Thriller Fest, for us it was really a bellwether moment, because that's where we connected, and it's like I said, it's where the podcast kind of grew out of. And people had even met us at the end of that weekend, said, "Did you guys go to college together?" And we're like, "No, we met on Thursday." And they're like, whatever.
Definitely camaraderie from Thriller Fest friends, for sure.
Yeah. But, it really, really was such a positive experience for us. So you talked about it earlier and talked about all the rejections you had and how you found your agent there. Can you tell us about some of the connections that the conference opened up for you? And then how soon after the conference did your rejections all of a sudden become yes, where you got your deal?
I'm trying to think. I think we had been gone. I went to the first, and then we maybe went to 2 or 3 before we got our agent. But
Okay.
it was at Thriller Fest where, like, I became friends with Anthony Franz, who hooked me up with the editor that helped me with the network. Like, that was my first year, and he and I are, still good friends. There's a couple of, like, friend EJ Finder, I don't know if you know him.
I know the name, yeah.
Was
Mhm.
there the very first year I was there. So we always hang out every year because he goes every year since. Some of the, obviously much better known writers like David Morrell, he's been a great mentor who I got to know in the first, second time or something there. Who else, Valerie? I mean, a lot of friends that we hang out with there. Wendy Walker, who actually lives in Connecticut, and we bonded at Thriller Fest and became close. I mean, I feel like so many of my writer friends, it all started at Thriller Fest, and we met. I'm trying to think. I don't even know how we got Gretchen, but the editor who we ended up getting with Mrs. Parrish, she is the one who referred us to the agent that we ended up going with, Bernadette Bauman with Victoria Sanders. And she was actually going to Thriller Fest when we had queried her, and she was interested. And when we found out she was going, we sent her an email, and so she arranged to meet us there. But we didn't know whether or not she was going to take the book. And I remember Val and I didn't sign up for Pitch Fest. We had done that, I think, maybe 1 or 2 years prior to that. And I got a text from Bernadette. She was having lunch with Jamie Levine, which was the editor that I used on the network. Right. And she said to me, but Bernadette was like, I can see you. I'm going to be a little later, but I'll see you in like 15 minutes. And I said to Val, I really feel like if she liked the book, she would have said, I loved it. I can't wait to talk to you. But I think because we know people in common, she's trying to be polite and she'll just let us down in person. So maybe we should register for Pitch Fest, right? So that we don't blow it. So it was in the hotel room, and we for many years we volunteered as at Thriller Fest as volunteer coordinator. So Val was downstairs working the registration desk, and I was upstairs getting ready to go pay for Pitch Fest. And Jamie sent me a text. She was having lunch with Bernadette, and she said, "You don't have to go to Pitch Fest if you don't want to."
Wow.
So I ran down and I told Valerie, and then when they came back in and we met Bernadette, within 10 minutes she said, I love the book, and we'd like to offer you representation. And we said, we would like to take it. So it was really exciting. Right in the lobby of the Hyatt. And then we said, can we tell people? She said, yes. So we, that was where we got to share it with all of our friends who had been with us. You know how it is. You're all together, encouraging each other. So it was really amazing.
Well, that must have explained all the cartwheels that you were doing in the lobby there after you. So I have a question. Inevitably, no matter how much you love each other, you're going to have some conflict. Particularly if you feel strongly with opposing views on particular sections of the book. So what have you found works the best for the two of you to resolve the conflict? Obviously, you're not throwing furniture or anything, but how do you resolve that conflict and come to a feeling where you both feel like, yes, this is the best piece for what we're writing for now?
We arm wrestle.
I was just going to say that.
I like that. Can we want to bring you on the show and we'll do that next time. That'd be great.
Boom.
Next time.
We very diplomatically state our case to each other, and then we talk about it, and again we go to character and say, all right, if you were so and so, do you think you'd really do that or say that? And then usually the other person says, no, you're right, or yes, I would, and here's why, and that's how we resolve it. I mean, we've only had a couple instances where we really couldn't, and then we emailed the editor and said, well, we're not going to tell you who says what, but here's the two choices. What do you think?
There you go.
Really
good. Who wins? Who wins?
Right.
Who wins?
Oh, well,
I think we've each won one of those.
I think so too. But for the most part,
That's what that chalkboard is behind you, I see, with the chalk mark with your name.
Yeah, right.
That's awesome.
Well, Lynne, Valerie, you have survived the main portion of our interview, so congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to move on to the lightning round.
Oh,
right.
We've
Grab
each
your drink, folks.
Yeah, grab a drink. We've each prepared some questions for you. And as we tell all our guests, we've put very little thought into these questions. So we expect very little thought in response.
Oh,
Right. That's great. Good.
First thing that comes to mind is typically the right answer in life. So you can go with that. So I'm actually going to start it off since I'm hosting tonight. So, so the last Mrs. Parrish is set in Bishop's Harbor, Connecticut. Of course, I'm a bishop, and you might not be aware of it, but I am actually from Connecticut. I was actually born and raised in Newington, Connecticut. I must know, though. Actually, I'm wearing Elm Hill Pizza, Newington. I've got a little promo going tonight, so you need to go up there for pizza at some
Sponsorship?
point. Sponsorship, absolutely. But I must know, have either of you ever been to Bishop's Orchards, which is in Guilford, Connecticut?
I have not.
No.
Oh,
Could be the
okay.
scene of your next book. Yeah.
Exactly.
A body is founding.
So why is that so special, Eric?
It's my family's orchard, actually. So
There you go.
Oh, there you go.
my dad's side of the family. Actually, we went up for a family trip last summer, and we took my kids. I said, and they're like, "Oh, we have an orchard." I'm like, "Well, not really, but hey,
Nah.
their name on the thing."
Don't start spending the money yet.
So tell us, does Bishop's have an apostrophe S?
It does.
I
Yes.
did not.
Oh.
That
Yeah.
was,
There you go.
Took
that
it
was a
out.
good question when we were at it. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, no kidding. Huh.
it's interesting.
So who wanted the apostrophe and who didn't?
I think it was a copy editor thing.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Mhm.
It's always the copy editor.
The copy.
Always.
And the publisher's like, whatever.
Exactly. So my next question, will you both please finish this statement about each other?
Oh, dear.
Uh-oh.
The funniest thing my sister ever did was fill in the blank.
Oh,
Gosh.
my sister did was. So,
Figured funny is better than the
Oh,
baddest thing.
was,
We'll go with funny.
okay,
So,
That is even better. The funniest thing. right?
might have been.
My sister ever did. I mean, that, she's done a lot of funny things. But when we made, do I have to finish it in one word?
No, absolutely not.
Thank you. Okay. So when the last Mrs. Parrish made it into People magazine,
Mhm.
we rushed right to CVS, and I happened to be in Connecticut with her at the time. So together we went to CVS, and we said we would like 6 copies of the latest People magazine issue. So the guy behind the counter brings the magazines out, and there's a woman standing behind us waiting for when we finished. So he plopped the magazines down, and on the cover is Harvey Weinstein. And the woman kind of looked at us, and Lynn turned to her and said, "He's a friend of ours."
What?
Brutal.
Kidding, she was kidding. So that's the first funny thing I could think of.
I mean, the
Oh.
most funny thing my sister has ever done is just deadpan answers when we're talking about something, and always keeps me in stitches. We have a very similar sense of humor. So we'll talk to each other. And I remember my daughter, when she was a little younger, was like, "God, you're just being so mean to each other," because we're very sarcastic. We're just like, "Oh, it's fine, it's fine." And then we'll be hysterically laughing, and they just look at us, my kids, like, "Oh, you're so weird." But
That's so
all,
funny.
all our kids will do that. They'll
Yeah, my
just
kids
a
think I'm
little
weird too. Yeah.
So my final question.
Harvey Weinstein, though.
That's the promo right there. Harvey, you bought it for Harvey Weinstein.
We're not tagging that dude on this show. That's
No. He doesn't need the attention. FaceTime crashes and the internet goes down, but you've got a deadline and you've got 48 hours to turn in the final draft of your next book. Quick, what are each of you going to do?
is the internet gone too?
Oh, yeah.
Internet's gone and FaceTime's gone, and you guys live 2 states away. So you got 48 hours. What's going to happen?
I guess we're going to get on the phone, put the phone on speaker, and one of us is going to type while the other one talks.
There you go.
Right?
What else can you do, right?
Yeah.
You'll find a way.
Yep.
I thought you were going to say Valerie had to come to you or something, had to drive you to
Right. No, we'll wait because we'll
Would've
find
said
out
that.
apart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, normally I would.
You would, yeah, she would. Who's coming up? No,
It's coming up next week, so yeah. But that's
Yeah.
because we're
heading up there on Sunday, actually.
Mm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, it's my first time to ask questions for the lightning round.
Oh.
So
Don't
you
mess
guys-
up, Lori.
Yeah, don't
mess
screw this up.
I'm planning on
Please.
messing up. That's the best part.
Definitely mess up. Yes.
All right, you're on the road a lot, doing book tours. What is your favorite snack on the road? And do you have any good on the road stories? Each of you.
Wine.
Nice.
snack.
Brilliant.
Is that a staple? I
It's
don't
a
know.
joke.
Really?
Wait, what did you say, Lynn? I didn't hear you.
She said wine. I said, I don't think it's a snack. I think that's a staple. So
Oh.
one of
That's a food group.
favorite snack, that's boring. Probably going to just be like an energy bar or something like that. And what was the next question? Funny.
Favorite on the road stories. It's not really, yeah. You have any good?
Well, the last time we were in Tulsa, and I have to say that they were the nicest people I think I've ever met anywhere. And that, right, Val? I mean, everywhere we went, people were just so friendly. It's not necessarily funny, but it was just surprising to me. Yeah.
Hmm.
I think.
Yeah. Midwestern people, man. They're good.
Aaron, have you been to the Midwest? I've been to the South, but yeah,
A little bit.
overly, like I almost felt like we're in a Twilight Zone. You know, they were so nice.
And we met a really cool dog in Houston. Was it Houston? Where
Murder by the Book, that's Houston, I think, right?
Houston? I
Is that
can't. I'm not sure, but she was all dressed up in she was in a dress and a tiara, little dog. And
Yeah. Dogs in New York have a better wardrobe than I do.
Oh, yeah.
Valerie took the tiara.
Yeah.
Which actually is my
And you took the tiara from the dog and wore it.
Arm wrestled it.
for a day. Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I love it. Which actually, that's my second question. I know you're both dog lovers. We're all animal lovers here. I'm a big dog lover, but I also have 2 cats, and they're meowing at my door the entire time we've been here. And Sean is also, he likes bears, the other guy. This podcast. I want to hear about your dogs. What are their names, and are they good writing companions for you? I knew
Dude, she has a photo.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
On my
I saw you hold it up earlier.
on my desk.
Is that a King Charles?
King Charles Cavalier.
Oh.
His name is Zorba.
Ah,
Zorba.
Zorba.
Yes,
He's adorable.
it's an English breed, and my husband is British, so I had to give him a Greek name.
Ah.
naturally.
Get a balance in the family here.
Right. And I have big dogs. I have a charcoal lab whose name is Grayson.
Grayson.
And we have an English cream golden retriever named Parker. And they are definitely not good writing partners because they just play all the time. So Grayson will sit in the corner of my office and begin to growl at me after if I stop and play with him. And then I'll look at him and I'll talk to him for a minute. I'll start typing, and then all of a sudden you'll hear him again growling at the corner for me. So, we're precious.
Reading what you're writing.
Excuse me?
You think he's reading what you're writing?
Oh, it's got a
Yeah.
bit of an
Like,
editor.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love this sister thing. It's great. All right. My last question is, what is your sister's favorite dance move?
Oh.
Everyone's
my
got one they
Valerie-
always rely on.
The tango, I would say, for Valerie.
Oh,
Tango.
fancy.
That's cool.
Wow.
Nice.
I would say Dirty Dancing for Lynne.
Right. I don't think I'm very good at that, actually. But,
Very nice. Very nice.
We'll confirm that with your husband.
I love that movie. She just has a
That will be our promo opening.
Yep.
Yes.
The
Time of
Constantine
your life,
sisters
last time I
and
saw you,
Dirty
times
Dancing.
mixed in there.
Exactly.
So you do Dirty Dancing, yes.
Beautiful. Well, I'm going to try and I'm not sure I can top that. All right. This question's for Valerie. In an earlier career, you worked as a White House assistant in the president's scheduling and advanced planning office.
Cool. Pretty cool.
With the knowledge that your co-host, Christopher, is a former Secret Service agent,
This guy.
Oh, wow.
right here. Can you tell us how you get back at an agent who needed a little smackdown and a little corrective behavior?
Did you need a little smackdown?
Never.
Sometimes need a little adjustment. So we'd like to know
Never.
how your office would manage to do that.
We loved the Secret Service.
Heck
Yeah.
yeah. Of course. We always get along with the
Absolutely.
scheduling and traveling folks. Always.
You have to, right?
Yeah, otherwise the job doesn't get done. It really doesn't.
Exactly. So
This is not the answer I was hoping for.
Sorry, dude.
We know what really went on, right, Chris?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he still hasn't told us.
Still sworn to secrecy.
Man,
Yep.
one more drink.
When
All right.
when were you there though? What years?
I was there a really long time ago. I don't
But-
really give you the years, but it was.
Oh, okay.
It was I'll tell you this. It was in a time when White House communication teams and advanced teams would go out before the president got there to a hotel or wherever he was staying and set up telephones in all of the rooms and we would get all of the phone numbers, and I'm not talking about cell phones.
Right.
All right.
Landlines. There were no cell phones then. And computers were, I used a Selectric typewriter.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of gives you an idea of how long ago that was.
You'd
Well-
be surprised they still do it the same way.
Surprised me at all, actually.
All right, Valerie, I'm a little disappointed. All right, number 2. This one's for Lynne. On a scale of 1 to 10, how badly do you secretly want to crush your sister with success from your network series written in the nom de plume L.C. Shaw? And there's no holding back on this one.
Oh my God.
Brutal.
Well, I don't want to crush her, but I would have to say on a 10, I would love that. And then, of course, I would share my success with her, as you know.
He would give me half the money.
We're 0 for 2 now.
Yeah, but I did say I would give her a good portion of the money. Yeah.
Ah.
Oh,
But I
man.
don't be, living all over the world by myself with just, with my family. I want her to come along too. So yeah, so she could ride along. But yeah,
Mm.
All right. I'm not accepting either of these answers. So now I'm going to go to question number 3. And this is for the 2 of you. All right. Instead of state lines separating you two, if the writing duo shared a single room office, which of you would start bringing up childhood arguments first?
Lynn.
we don't have any childhood. I'm sorry to disappoint you.
She was pretty quick in that answer.
I think Valerie's speaking the truth here.
And at the same time. So
We weren't, because we're 13 years apart. So we have
Yeah.
2 brothers. Now, if I was sharing an office with my brother, Michael, I could bring a lot of stuff up, right? I love him, Michael, if you're listening. But we're closer in age. So, yeah. So,
All right. Well, that was highly disappointing round.
Nah. All right. Well, Mike, let me see if I can continue.
you can make something.
Let's see if I can get something out of them.
All right. Let's rile them up here, Christopher.
All right. So who got better grades in school? Which one?
Probably you probably got better grades in high school, right? And then I don't know. I mean, I think we both did pretty well in college. So
You did great in college.
yeah.
So, Val, are you the oldest sister?
I am.
See, it's the firstborn. We are the perfect children.
Yeah.
No,
I
you're
get
not.
it. I
Yeah.
I
get
didn't
it.
care in high school. I was like, yeah. I mean, if I look back at my high school, the way career or record, they probably would have said, I don't know much what's going to happen to this kid. So and then when I went to college and I was interested in it, I got on the dean's list and I was like, oh, who knew?
You just had to like something.
I just had to like
Right.
Yeah.
something.
All right. So
I-
Valerie crushed her sister in high school. So we got
All
that
right,
one.
so
out.
there we
There
go.
you go. Oh, my
So Lynn, speaking of high school, Lynn, what's the most embarrassing thing that you remember Valerie did in high school?
Do you even remember anything I did in high
I
school?
don't
Probably
remember.
not.
The story's handed
I'll tell you
down.
one story about that I remember from childhood. We were driving in the car and there was a Beatles song playing on the radio, and I was singing along, really happy, with abandon. And she turned around and said, "You're supposed to try to sound like them when you're singing."
Brutal.
And that's why you never became a singer.
And so I've never sang in public again. She ruined my career.
Spirit was crushed.
Right.
We're seeing a little bit more of Valerie here.
There
I
we
like
go.
this.
There
All
we
right.
go.
The original Simon Cowell here.
Nice call, Eric.
And so here is your final question, Valerie. You get to turn Lynne into an inanimate object for an entire year.
For an entire
What?
year.
What is it?
Oh my gosh. Year.
And remember, you're a writer, so come up with something good.
It's got to be snappy.
No pressure.
An inanimate object. Oh my gosh. I think I would make her a life-size stuffed teddy bear.
Like
Not a
one
book.
from Costco.
Got one.
From carnivals. Okay, well, Lynne. So
There it
back
is.
to you, Lynne. Lynne, what would you turn your sister into for a year?
I'd make her a book.
A big book, a book you could read.
And I could read it. Yes, I could spend time with you. Right.
Oh,
Not like a coloring book
Not like
all over.
I don't know. Nobody's buying this.
Nah, you guys are too nice.
Yeah.
Way too nice.
No wonder they get along.
I was hoping you'd say like, fire poker.
They're
The fire
80,000
behind
words
you.
in. They have to finish a book together. They got to
I
be
know.
sweet. So
Yeah, you're gonna have to wait until July at the Thriller Fest bar, and then
Right.
Yeah,
right.
we're going to grab a handful of drink coupons. We're going to get the real answers here. This is going to
There
be
you go. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Lynne, Valerie,
Yeah.
you've
It's been a lot of
survived
fun.
the lightning round.
Yay.
Yeah.
Very well done.
Thank you.
We want to toast you. We want to thank you for coming on the Crew Reviews,
Thank
and it was an honor to have you. And we enjoyed our conversation with you very much.
Had a lot of fun.
This is great, ladies. Thank you so much.
The crew, Mike, Chris, this week Lori, since Sean is out, and myself would like to thank Lynne and Valerie Constantine for coming on our show this week. It was a real pleasure to have them on. Their next novel, The Wife Stalker, comes out on May 18th, 2020, so go out and get yourself a copy. You won't be disappointed. We'd like you to go on social media, follow us, and join us every Monday as we bring you a new episode with the best authors in the business.
Look at that.
Gentlemen and lady,
Wasn't sure who, but that don't
wasn't
matter.
sure who.
All right.
Another
Doesn't
great
matter.
show.
Good
Thank you.
show.
Nice.
Thank you, sis.
Anytime.
Eric screwing up in 3, 2, 1. This is
Very
outro for the Constantine Sisters show. In 3, in 2, again.
Jazz hands.
The crew, Mike,
No.
Chris. What?
We're still laughing.
Let me finish my cookie.
Their first novel, The Last Mrs. Parrish, is not something I need to talk about.
Nope.
See, when you don't have a script, this becomes what do you say? What do you
Well,
say?
That's the question.
I'm just making this longer so he has to edit for 4 months instead of 3. So
Gonna cut your head off for this one.
Yeah.
there you go.
Do like what he did to Sean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Half his body.
I can make it happen, people.
Do it. Get it. Buy it.
Not how he
Please.
says it.
What?
It's not how he says it.
Do it.
Do it.
Do it.
He does got
No,
do
you
in
go.
there.
You go.
Go buy it. Do it.
Do it. That's not how he said it. He said, do it.
So long there.
Do it.
So I got to start from the beginning again.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, because it sucked pretty much up until that point.
Pretty much. Don't drink all your booze.
Yeah, don't like
My water will be
you're gonna have to change
my
your
smart
depends.
water is all good.
Apparently, it's not working.
It's really not.
For our fans and friends, thanks for joining us. Please go to Twitter and why did I
You
do
don't go to Twitter.
We don't go to
Twitter is where it all goes.
Damn it!
Sean, we don't go to Twitter.
I know.
Don't say what Chris says, because when you say it,
doesn't
it sounds like somebody that's like it's like a third language.
You got to bring out the Jersey in you.
You got to run the word together. It's not. You can't actually. Yeah, you can't actually spell it. It's more of an. Sorry, Lori.
Lori's like, did I sign up for this crap?
She knows who we are.
Suck.
The crew would like to thank Lynne and Valerie Constantine for coming on our show this week. Nope.
Yep. How about us?
Yeah,
Never mind. Yeah, never mind us.
The Wife Stalker comes out on May 18th, 2020. And as someone we know would say, go get that book and do it.
No.
That's not how he would say it at all.
Say it something like that.
Better. Keep that one.
Go
I have
out
to
and
edit
buy
at some
it.
point. I'm not starting this thing 20
Go-
times. So
Go out and buy it.
Go ahead and buy
Do
it.
it.
go
do
out
it.
and buy it.
Yeah.
Don't even say. Don't bring me into this. That's my.
Thanks for joining us, Lori. It was a pleasure.
It was fun to be here.
Awesome.
Okay, can you
Yeah.
edit that to be somewhat not crap?
And that's even more fun when there's some drinking going on.